Hey guys, it's Kat and I'm back today with a bit of a chatty video. I do have a massive amount of makeup next to me. There's a lot of makeup. I was thinking, what do I film today? And then I decided that I wanted to sit down and have a chatty video. I might also film next a sort of, a lot of people have been mentioning these guys. Yeah, there's two cats there. I might do a meet my cats if they're going to stay still for as long as this video takes. So I might do that later. But I thought today I would talk about where I like to save and splurge with my makeup. Now, if you've been watching my channel for a long time, I started my channel when I was a student. So I probably used more drugstore products, and then I slowly sort of started trying more higher end brands and, you know, mid-range and luxury and indie and all that kind of stuff, and trying a bunch of stuff. But after like 6 or 7 years of reviewing makeup on my blog and then onto YouTube, I sort of know for me where I think is worth the splurge and where I think is worth saving money. So yeah, in this video, I'm just going to go through sort of each category of makeup and let you know what I personally like to splurge on and what I personally think is just better to save on. So that's what we're doing. So when it comes to primers, I don't actually use too many primers, so this is a bad one for me to pick. But if I had to pick my favorite ones, I do have to say that it's better to invest in primers. Now I've got here the Dermalogica, I've got upside down. This is the Hydrablur primer. This is a backup that I've got. And then I've got the Smashbox Photofinish primer oil. I feel like primer for me, it's sort of like an extension of skincare. It's just like another layer of skincare that will sort of sit under your makeup. And I feel like it's often good to invest in because you want the sort of skincare benefits to it rather than just a silicone, if that makes sense. So I do prefer to invest in them, but at the same time, I don't really like primers that much. So I'd either go no primer or like a good quality primer. Okay, so talking about base products, I'm going to say when it comes to foundation, even though I do have some nice sort of more expensive foundations, so Too Faced, this is Lancome, that I do like and I think works really well. For my oily skin, I find drugstore products are really good. I'm currently wearing the L'Oreal Infallible Pro Glow. I think it's a great everyday foundation. I quite like the Total Cover one. Revlon Colorstay is one of my all-time favorites when it comes to long wear foundation that doesn't budge. I also really like the Covergirl Outlast Stay Fabulous. These are all backups I have. And then you can go even cheaper to Wet n Wild. This is the Photofocus foundation. So I find that majority of foundations I actually have in my collection at the moment are like cheaper ones. Now, I think for me, because I do have oily skin and I want my makeup to last on me, I find that drugstore tend to be better. My favorite of the bunch is probably the Too Faced one, so it's a little bit more expensive, but overall I do like drugstore foundations. But whether or not you would prefer a high-end foundation or a drugstore one, I think it depends on your skin type. I think if you've got aging skin, it's better to go higher end. They've got probably better, they often have better skincare benefits to it, so it works better for that. Also, if you have drier skin, generally higher end ones are more hydrating and once again more skincare focused. But if you want something that just looks nice on the skin and lasts all day, I personally find that drugstore ones generally are better than higher end. So for me, there have been some higher end ones that I've been impressed with lately, but if I look at my whole collection, I mainly have drugstore foundations. And exactly the same thing goes for concealers. My favorite one is the Tarte Shape Tape out of the ones I have, but the rest of the ones I really like are drugstore. I've got Maybelline, I've got Wet n Wild, so Fit Me, Age Rewind. So I find that these work better for me than a lot of higher end ones. I've got It Cosmetics, I've got, I don't know, Lancome, I've got all these other ones. I find that they're all right, but they're quite sticky and I find that they move and they're a bit like difficult to blend out, whereas I find drugstore ones are great. So overall, I do say if you're trying to save money somewhere, you can definitely do it with concealers. But if you do, once again, have more aging skin or really dry skin, the more hydrating ones are the higher end ones. But if you just want something that looks really nice, has coverage and stays all day, I find drugstore really good. But I also, yeah, there are some higher end ones that I also like. Now, when it comes to powders, I think it totally depends on the type of powder. If you're looking for just like a mattifying or just a pressed powder, I always go drugstore. This is the Australis Fresh and Flawless. I've got a couple of these in my drawer as a backup. This is the Rimmel Stay Matte. I have a couple of these as backup. This is the One Heck of a Blot by Soap and Glory, which isn't like the cheapest drugstore, but it's still sort of drugstore. So I prefer pressed powders from the drugstore, but if I'm going for a loose powder, I would invest my money. So I've got IT Cosmetics, I have Linda Hallberg, and I have Too Faced Peach Perfect, which is probably my favorite out of the three. And I think the reason I like loose powders to be higher end is because you can really tell the quality of a loose powder. I find that I do have like Coty Airspun, which is much more affordable. I don't like this as much. It does set the face fine, but I think when it comes to like the under eye area, the smoother and the more finely milled, the better. So I find that these sort of higher end ones you can put all over your face, set your under eye area, and it just looks really, really nice and flawless. Whereas I find you can get some like cakiness and sort of separation with concealer if you try to set your under eye area with that. So yeah, pressed, I would save my money. Loose, I would invest a little bit more. When it comes to bronzers and contours, I actually don't really contour my face. I do bronze, so I get a fluffy brush and I sort of just bronze the perimeter of my face. And I know that's sort of contouring, but I don't do any harsh contouring. I just sort of do general bronzing. So for me, I think it's actually worthwhile to splurge. And some really nice ones that I have are these guys here. So I've got the Marc Jacobs. This is the Tantastic Omega Bronzer. It's massive, it's not cheap, but you've got so much product, it's gonna last forever. It blends super nicely. The color is really, really flattering. This is 25 grams of product. I also have the Too Faced. This is the Matte Chocolate Soleil, and this is 8 grams. So once again, you can get 25 grams. It's gonna last you years. Hoola Bronzer I think is great as well. This contains 8 grams. So I do think it's worthwhile investing in your bronzer, and the reason being is that I've tried a lot of cheaper bronzers that have very unflattering colors. They look very unnatural in the skin. They often look very orange. And I also find that sort of cheaper bronzers can often look very patchy on the skin, whereas these sort of blend flawlessly. You don't need to put much effort into them. They just apply really easily. If I only needed one bronzer to last me like 2 years, this one, okay, it's expensive, but it's gonna last you so long and you're gonna look good every time you use it. So I think that's really important to have makeup that's really easy to use and looks really flattering. And I find more expensive bronzers do that. Now, of course, there are exceptions to the rules. People love butter bronzer. I don't mind the formula of this. I hate the scent. So I just find it not good. Some of the shades aren't the best in this range. So yeah, look, there are always exceptions to what I'm saying, but generally a good bronzer can make your base look good or bad. And yeah, you don't want it to look bad. Onto blushes, and I've got a bit of a split with this. I find that shimmery blushes are often better to save on because you can get some top-notch shimmery blushes that are very, very affordable. I've got one here from Wet n Wild. I'm wearing this on my face today. It's gorgeous. I've got a Milani baked blush in Luminoso. I've got a few other ones as well. And then this is a sleek blush in Rose Gold. So all of these perform as good or better than other shimmery blushes I've tried from higher end brands. So I find that it's definitely an area you can save on. So like, for example, this is a great combination. Spend on this, splurge on this. However, in saying that, I do find splurging on matte blushes are better than saving. Now, some of my favorite formulas of matte blushes, the Illamasqua powder blushes. I don't like their shimmery versions of these, but I really love their matte ones. So once again, similar to the loose powders, a matte, really silky, soft, finely milled blush will make or break a look. And I find that you can get some really fantastic mattes from higher end brands, whereas I find that a lot of drugstore mattes can be very powdery and they just don't really drying. They don't really look very flattering on the skin, so I think mattes, spend a bit more on mattes, save on the shimmers. Okay, when it comes to highlighters, I'm a bit torn. You can get some really great affordable ones. So for example, I've got ColourPop. So these are sort of like the moussey consistency. They're really, really beautiful. This is a Maybelline Master Chrome. It is very nice. Wet n Wild have great highlighters. They look really beautiful. This one by Model's Own is surprisingly gorgeous. I might put it on. This is in the shade Golden Sand. So that's the color there. It's like a, I don't know, pinky kind of champagne color. And once again, if you want sort of a beautiful highlighter, you can get them very affordably. Like, you don't need to pay a lot of money for a beautiful, like, smooth but intense, gorgeous highlighter. So it's pretty much just a really intense pigment, so it's really easy to get a highlighter right. So you definitely can save on highlighters if you wanted to. Otherwise, I think it's always nice as well. You can get higher end ones. I find that higher end ones often offer a more diverse range of finishes and colors. So I really like the MAC Extra Dimension ones. I find the Laura Mercier, this is the Highlight 01, so it's a matte radiance baked powder. I find this is one of the most flattering highlighters. It's very, very finely milled. It sits really nicely on the skin. It's not as intense as something like this, so it's more of a natural glow, and it's just really, really gorgeous. It would be good on like all ages as well. You can get more like reflective ones, and like Vlada MUA with Smashbox, you can get some really beautiful duochrome ornate ones. So I find that, you know, you can save on highlighters and still get a really kind of trendy, extreme highlighter kind of glowy look, but you could also spend a little bit more and get something a little bit more unique. It's up to you, but they both offer great things. So when it comes to brows, I do like to spend a little bit more on brow products. I used to start with drugstore, and I found that my brows were horrible. Like, I look back and I'm like, oh my God. So either the pencils were sort of too creamy and deposited too much product, they were too warm toned. It just wasn't the best. So ever since I've sort of swapped to brands that are sort of like more dedicated to creating a variety of brow products and specializing in brow products, I think my life has changed. My brow life has changed. So my favorite brand to talk about, I mean, you probably all know, is Benefit. I think their revamped brow range is fantastic. Their clear brow gel is great. Their brow pomades, I've got 3 shades here, they're great. Their pencils are great. You have thick ones to sort of fill in areas in a really sort of like subtle, you can apply a small amount or you can like build it up. I really like their Precisely My Brow ones where you can like mimic little hairs. I think the consistency is great. It's sort of like creamy but controllable. You're not applying too much product. The shades are all sort of very, very natural. They're not very red or orange or yellow looking. So I really like spending a bit more on brows. And a brow powder I love is from Anastasia Beverly Hills. So this is just a dark brown brow powder duo. It's what I'm wearing today. And I just find that once again, it just works really well. So I do find brow products last for such a long time. I've had this for years and years and years. So it's probably worth investing in one that really matches your brows well, that will last a long time on your face. You won't have it smearing off, and that is easy to control. I think that's a huge thing. I've tried cheaper brow pomades and they're like paint that it just makes your brows look like block brows. Something that's a little bit drier and grippier, but then sets down, it's worthwhile, because otherwise you'll look at your face at the end of the day and your brows are all smeared and it's not good. Eyeshadow primers, I think these days you can get some decent, more affordable ones. I've got one by Wet n Wild that's quite nice, but I still do like the higher end ones. Now, I think it's only been the last few years that drugstore brands have released sort of like eyeshadow primers. Prior to that, they were always sort of makeup junkie, makeup artist type product. So I think that the brands that are sort of makeup artist brands or slightly higher end brands, not like luxury, but like, you know, Makeup Forever and all those kind of MAC and all those kind of brands, Urban Decay, they sort of have been doing eyeshadow primers for much longer than drugstore brands. So I still feel like they do them better. My favorite glitter glue is by Too Faced. This is super affordable for the longevity you get. I've had this for over a year and I've got the majority of it left. Like, it just works so well with shimmer eyeshadows and glitter eyeshadows. And I really love MAC paint pots. I think these are very, very important because a decent base can even make a bad eyeshadow wear quite well. So I think it's important to invest in your eyeshadow base. Okay, so when it comes to eyeshadows, I think there is a sweet spot between drugstore and luxury. There's a band there of indie, mid-range makeup artist brands that do eyeshadows the best. Now, it's not always the case. You can get some good eyeshadows from the drugstore. You can get some great ones from the luxury brands, but I find that middle band is always the best. So, not always, generally the best. I find drugstore often you can get some anomaly brands that create really great stuff, but overall, they're pretty wishy-washy and mundane. And I think that's because the masses of people that buy them generally aren't people that are super confident in applying really shimmery or metallic or colorful eyeshadows. So they tend to pare them down and make them a little bit more dull. So they're easier to work with if you're new to eyeshadows or you're not really interested in, mastering eyeshadows. So I find for me, drugstore are generally no-go. Indie are great. They have really nice pigmentation, really great quality. Makeup brands like Inglot are generally pretty good and pretty affordable. If you look at the cost per gram, these are probably cheaper than drugstore eyeshadows. It's just not harder to get. Well, it can be harder to get depending where you live, but also you sort of have to buy them in singles and create a palette, which ends up being quite costly. Now, you can buy a palette and put one eyeshadow in if you wanted to and build it up slowly, but it does look a little bit more intimidating being so sort of expensive in the long run. But these are decent quality eyeshadows. They're not my favorite, but I think cost per shadow, these are really quite good. Then I think there's brands that are sort of mid-range. So something like Too Faced, they can create some shit eyeshadows, let's put it out there, but they can also create some nice ones. This is the chocolate bar palette, which I'm wearing on my eyes today. It's a really easy palette to use. I think Bare Minerals create some very, very beautiful eyeshadows. So I feel like that sort of price range, that sort of not really high-end, sort of mid-range, create some bomb eyeshadows along with indie brands. And then I think if you get up to luxury, often they lose the plot. It's just too expensive for what it is, and the quality doesn't get any, much better than the mid-range brands. So I personally wouldn't really delve into the luxury side of the makeup industry to get eyeshadows because I feel like they're never as good as the category below them, and they're just heaps more expensive. With eyeliners, once again, I'm going to split this category. I feel like pencil liners, you can get some really good ones from the drugstore. This is just by Rimmel. So I think that they can be creamy, pigmented, last a long time. You could also get them a bit higher up. This is Urban Decay, but I don't feel like you need to do that. I think drugstore, if you just play around and put them on your hand and then see how budge proof they are, you can get some decent ones. I do think it's better to invest your money in a decent gel liner if you're into gel liners, because I feel like they just are creamier and generally more pigmented and wear better. So this is Inglot. This is MAC. These are two of my favorite brands that do them. So a lot of people go, oh, why are you buying MAC when you can buy Maybelline? I've tried the Maybelline ones. I don't like them. I much prefer MAC. They stay creamy and easy to use until the very last drop. And Inglot have the best pigmentation when it comes to colors and unique colors and stuff like that. So I think that it's best to sort of invest in a gel liner, and they last you years. So it's like a worthy investment. They're like 30 something bucks. It's not that much, but they will last you a long time. And then when it comes to liquid liners, I'm not the best to talk about them because I don't really use many of them. So I would probably go that middle band as well, like the Stila kind of range, because even though Maybelline and some brands from the drugstore have some great liquid liners, I find they dry up quicker. So if you want to get longevity, I find maybe going up again to something like Stila is worth your while. With mascara, I think it's 50-50. I'm not too fussed. I think that once again, there's some great drugstore mascaras. Maybelline have released a lot of good ones in the last few years, but at the same time, Lancome and MAC and those kind of brands have some really great ones as well. So it just depends on what you want to invest in. But mascara is different for everyone, and I think both drugstore and higher end have great options. When it comes to false lashes, I always think it's a place that you can save. I've tried some really expensive lashes that are like $30, and I found that they break apart often just as much as like the cheaper ones. For me, what I look for with lashes is that they're comfortable and the band is thin and flexible. And my favorite ones, I've talked about this multiple times, is Model Rock. These are the W376s, and they're always on sale at the Model Rock website. So I find that these are worth saving on because you can buy a lot more fancier lashes and it just depends on the style you want. But I find that you could always go cheaper, and as long as you're picky with the style and you're picky with the lash band and you kind of go, that looks comfortable, that looks like it'll suit my eye, you can always get cheaper ones. And this is 1000 Hour Lash Glue, which is really affordable as well. Model Rock Lash Glue is really great as well, so I do skimp here. Before we move on to the lips, I do want to talk about sort of special eye stuff, so like glittery eye stuff. I do think that this is worth splurging on as well. So like the Stila Magnificent Metals are great to add like some glitter that doesn't, you know, fall out and doesn't flake off. I think they're really, really great. Pixi have some good ones as well. These are liquid fairy lights. I think these work really well. I have tried the ColourPop ones. I don't like them. They flake off my face. These are the Supernovas. So if you want something like sparkly in a liquid form, I think it's worth investing in, and they last a long time. So it's not like a bad investment. I also find that if you want some special eyeliners, so I was talking about Inglot having colorful gel eyeliners, I think it is worth spending more money on. This is JD Glow. These are what I'm wearing today. I'm wearing the purple one, which is in Shooketh. These are sort of, look at the cats go. These are liquid liners that have a multi-chrome pigment in it. And once again, you know, these, I just find that if you spend a little bit more money on an indie brand or a higher end brand, you generally get better staying power and pigmentation and even just more unique products. So I do think that for those sort of special things, pigments and glitters and stuff like that, it's probably worth spending a little bit more money on. Okay, lip balms, I think you can always save. People talk about Laneige Sleeping Mask. I've got it, I'm using it. I actually prefer Carmex. So for me, I think for a lip balm or like something like that, a lip treatment, often just cheaper is better. Like, yeah, instead of spending 20 bucks on a lip balm, I would prefer to spend a couple of bucks on Carmex. I also find that when it comes to lip balms, I like the Burt's Bees one. I think that's great. So I feel like those are always areas that you can save a little bit. I think also lip glosses you can save. These are some lip glosses that I love to use. They're all very, very affordable. We've got a ColourPop lip gloss. We've got a NYX Butter Gloss, which is great. And I've also got the Ulta 3. This is a lip glaze tinted oil. All these are things that sit in my handbag all the time because I reach for them. They're super comfortable and they give like a nude lip with a bit of a sheen, some hydration, and it doesn't need to break the bank. I think the higher end ones, you don't need them. I think, yeah, I would definitely save on lip glosses and lip balms. And then if you do save on lip balms and lip glosses, then hopefully you can go a bit more fancy with lipsticks. Now I've got some NARS lipsticks, I've got some Hourglass lipsticks, I've got a Shiramura lipstick. These are just some examples of some sort of higher end lipsticks that I really like. I personally think it's worth splurging on a lipstick. I do have a lot of drugstore lipsticks that I really enjoy, but I find that they are a hit or miss. So for example, I really like one of the red NYX matte lipsticks, like in the tube, like bullet kind of lipsticks. But I find that when I've tried other shades from that same range, they're very, very powdery. They're very, very drying. They look really cakey, and they're just not great. So I feel like most drugstore lipsticks, you might get some good ones in the range, but generally they're not great. Better to splurge, you get a more comfortable, more pigmented, more flattering looking lipstick, and they generally wear a lot better. So whereas you might need to reapply a NYX one a couple of times, you might use an Hourglass one and not have to reapply it at all. So even though these are a lot more expensive, I think if you pick a shade that you really enjoy, you will get a lot of mileage out of it. And I also see it as being, when I've done my makeup, even if I've done a simple eye, simple base, and I've got a bold lip, if I look back later and my lip has smeared everywhere or it's going patchy or chunky, it ruins the whole look. So I feel like it's an area that's definitely worth investing in because you generally have a better looking lip, a more comfortable feel, and it's just, yeah, longer lasting, better. So I find, yeah, generally lipsticks are way better to invest in than lip balms, lip glosses, even base products sometimes. So yeah, definitely think lipsticks are an area to invest in because the difference between a good and a bad lipstick will make or break your look. I also think the same way about liquid lipsticks, unfortunately. I was hoping to be like, oh, I've got so many good drugstore liquid lipsticks, so I can balance that out. I don't. I've only got a couple. I find some Wet n Wild ones are good, others aren't the best. But generally, most sort of drugstore liquid lipsticks I've used, I don't really like. And the best ones are actually sort of higher end. Too Faced have great ones. YSL generally have some great ones. This is a Laura Mercier one. It's a liquid lipstick that doesn't set, but it's a gorgeous color. NARS have really good ones. This Ofra one is quite good as well. So I find that often, yeah, it's worthwhile spending a bit more on the liquid lipsticks too. Once again, for a more comfortable, less drying, long wearing sort of pigmented look. I've got a lot of drugstore ones and they just feel like they're a desert on the lips and they crack, they just look horrible. These generally stick and work with the skin a lot better and just look a lot nicer. Okay, so lips were pretty pricey, but I don't think lip liners have to be. So similar to eyeliners, I think you can get some great lip liners that are really affordable. This is just by Colourpop. It's very creamy, nicely pigmented. So I feel like lip liners, generally, I find that drugstore ones often work better than higher end ones. Lastly, I want to talk about finishing sprays and setting sprays, and unfortunately, I do think it's worth investing a little bit more and getting a better one. So one that I have that is like a setting spray is the Urban Decay All Nighter. I think this does extend the longevity of your makeup. And you know, I think it is worth the hassle. I also think if you want like a spray to sort of rehydrate or to settle down the makeup a little bit more so it doesn't look as powdery and as cakey, once again, I think you got to go for slightly better ones. I really like MAC Fix Plus. I just don't have that at the moment. But the Mario Badescu, this is a facial spray with aloe and chamomile and lavender. This one's pretty decent. I generally don't like lavender, but I don't mind this. And we all know that the Shiramura one is like my favorite. It's got a bit of oil in it. And it's just a super, super fine mist that just feels really refreshing and yet takes down that sort of powderiness of your face. So I do feel like they've also got a long wear one of these as well. But I do feel like if you want your sort of sprays to do something and not just be a fancy water in a bottle, you sort of have to spend a bit more money, unfortunately. So that's just sort of where I like to spend my money and save my money. I know it's going to be different for everyone. And I also know that depending on your skin type, if you've got any skin concerns, if you've got dry skin, if you've got aging skin, if you've got sensitive skin, often higher end brands work better for base products for you. And that's totally fine. But this is just where I have noticed where buying higher end makes more of a difference for me personally. I know that no matter how rich I get or how poor I get, if I was to always buy makeup, I would prefer to buy a drugstore pressed powder and a higher end lipstick no matter what my circumstances. I will save up for a good lipstick than buy 10 shit lipsticks. At the same time, I would prefer to buy 10 basic powders than buy a really, really fancy powder that I know sort of does the same thing. So that's where I sort of like to balance a drugstore with higher end or invest more money versus less money. That's what I like to do. All right, guys, I know that was rambly and I apologize, but I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.